back again with another video. If you're new to Leftover Family, please make sure you smash that thumbs up, make sure you subscribe, and make sure post notifications are turned on. Without further ado, cue the intro.
Chef. Everybody call him chef.
Most of you guys know that I have lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma for a very long time. I don't reside there now, but that's where I used to reside. A lot of people don't know about the Tulsa Massacre, which happened, I think in the mid 1900s. It's not something that is discussed a lot up until recently, but it's not been taught in schools at all, not even in the Oklahoma history school books. So um, without further ado, we're gonna just dive straight into this video.
Exactly 100 years ago, on the morning of June 1st, 1921, the African American district of Greenwood in Tulsa, Oklahoma, was the scene of one of America's worst race riots. And it was the first time in history that an American city was bombed from the air.
Now, it was then classified as a race riot, but it wasn't a riot. It's considered a massacre now because the what all took place during this time frame.
Until then, Greenwood had been the most prosperous, wealthy, and well-educated African American community in the whole of the United States. Over 10,000 citizens lived in an area of 35 city blocks and comprised nearly 1/7 of the population of all Tulsa. The area was so wealthy, it was known as Black Wall Street. Besides homes, it had bakers, butchers, grocers, department stores, 20 churches, 2 of its own newspapers, several schools, a library, a 700-seat movie theater, and even a hospital. The attack was launched that day by the Ku Klux Klan, which had only recently established itself in the city. By fanning the flames of racism, the organization had grown to over 3,200 members. Deeply jealous of Greenwood's wealth and success, they set themselves to the task of destroying the African American community.
Okay, so I'll definitely talk about it now, but so my knowledge of what happened was there was a lady who got on an elevator with an African American male, and when she got off, she screamed "rape, rape, rape." Now, this happened years and years ago, right? So she just now came out. I think it was a couple of years back, and said that it never happened, but it was horrific. What something that somebody could say could drive people to destroy an entire community. Lives were lost. This area is now known as Greenwood. There's actually a stadium built right on top of where most of the businesses, homes, and offices used to be.
Lacking a justification, they invented one, claiming a 19-year-old African American shoeshine man named Dick Rowland had assaulted a 17-year-old elevator girl named Sarah Page. It didn't matter that she denied that it ever happened. The pro-KKK Tulsa Tribune ran an article calling for Rowland's lynching anyway.
Okay, so that's incorrect information. She didn't deny it at the time. At the time, she went through and said, "Oh, this is happened. This is what happened." She did not deny it until years later after all this took place. So that's kind of false information right there.
By late afternoon, a mob of KKK members had gathered at the courthouse, demanding the sheriff turn Rowland over. When he refused, a standoff ensued. Then a small group of African American Army veterans came to help the sheriff, and someone in the KKK mob opened fire, killing 2. They returned fire, shooting 10 of the KKK attackers before retreating back into Greenwood. As night fell, both sides began to prepare for the battle to come.
So those men, the African American men that went down there, they went down there to protect the individual who was locked up because they were trying to hang him, kill him, whatever. So they went down there to protect him because this is during the time when segregation was still, you know what I'm saying? So um, he was not safe in that jail with white officers protecting it. Let me say that.
When dawn broke on June 1st, the KKK had gathered several thousand armed men. 3 blasts of a siren sounded out, and the white mob surged forward to attack. The first shot was fired by an African American sniper who killed one of the KKK members. The rest rushed toward Greenwood and began to fire at anyone they could see. The African Americans returned fire and for a time even appeared to be driving the mob back. The Curtis Southwest Airplane Company was based at a nearby airport and had offered to support the KKK with about a dozen war surplus aircraft. These were Curtiss JN-4 Jennies, wooden fabric biplanes with 2 seats that the company had purchased from the U.S. Army Signal Corps after the end of World War I. What followed was the world's first firebombing of a city in history through the use of aircraft. It was not
Now, during all this, where is the U.S. military at this point? Why didn't anyone step in? This is what people don't know. So again, this is one of the only and the first times in America where bombs were dropped on citizens, and it devastated. It completely leveled an entire city and killed tons of people. A lot of people lost their lives in this. This was very, very sad. And so again, Oklahoma does not teach this in the history books. This is skipped over. Um, I grew up in Oklahoma and I was born there, and I didn't find out until I was 22, no, 23 when I found out about this.
not in a war with a foreign power, but rather pitted Americans against Americans in a battle along racial lines. Each of the pilots took an armed observer on board in the back seat. Some carried rifles, others sticks of TNT. Others yet carried buckets of fabric balls that they had soaked in turpentine to light on fire and drop onto the roofs of the Greenwood district. The planes descended from above into the heart of Greenwood, focusing their attack on Standpipe Hill, a few blocks from Mount Zion Baptist Church. One of the residents, a journalist named Mary Jones Parrish, later recounted, "There was a great shadow in the sky, and upon a second look we discerned that this cloud was caused by fast approaching aeroplanes. It then dawned upon us that the enemy had organized in the night and was invading our district the same as the Germans invaded France and Belgium. People were seen to flee from their burning homes, some with babes in their arms, yet seemingly I did not leave. I walked as one in a horrible dream." Ultimately, she fled the burning city and passed by the airfield. There she saw preparations for another attack that afternoon, which she described as planes out of their sheds, all in.
Now, it's hard to believe, and it's hard to imagine how a company in the U.S. that seemingly was supported by a lot of Black people um, gave the KKK the power, gave them planes, so that way they could drop bomb. They had, and you can't tell me that they didn't know that what was going to happen. They knew why all of a sudden they were wanting to buy these planes all of a sudden, and that to me is horrific. And the fact that the U.S. Army never stepped in to defend civilians who are tax-paying people providing a service. There's children, older, mm,
Readiness for flying, and these men with high-powered rifles getting into them. The air attack wasn't limited to bombing alone. One report tells of how a pilot steered his plane toward 2 men with their wives as they were running across an open field. Swooping low, they dropped a hail of lead balls or stones, hoping to kill them. They missed, and the 4 survived, later testifying about it in court. The pilots made low passes so the observers could shoot at those on the ground. As one leaned out to take a shot, an African American fired back. The man fell from the biplane to his death. As the Greenwood district burned, the Tulsa Fire Department responded but was held back by the white mob. When the National Guard finally arrived, the KKK opened fire on them too. Many residents fled but fell into the hands of the mob, who murdered them. One of the town's most prosperous African American men, a lawyer named Buck Colbert Franklin, witnessed the events, and later wrote, "I could see planes circling in midair. They grew in number and hummed, darted and dipped low. I could hear something like hail falling on the top of my office building. Down East Archer, I saw the old Midway Hotel on fire, burning from its top. And then another, and another, and another building began to burn from their top." He also related that lurid flames roared and belched and licked their forked tongues into the air. Smoke ascended the sky in thick black volumes, and amid it all, the planes, now a dozen or more in number, still hummed and darted here and there with the agility of natural birds of the air.
I don't care what race, what nationality you are, whether you're white, black, Hispanic, uh, German, Polish, British, I don't care what nationality you are. Just imagine yourself, put yourself in the shoes of these people and how they must felt. This is so horrible. Um, you can imagine these people were terrified for their lives, but at the same time, had to find a way to defend themselves because, as we see, like the National Guard didn't step in to win. It was too late. And with this kind of situation, the National Guard or the Army should have stepped in the day they uh, arrested this man, and the mob come to the jail. That was your first sign. Like you never wait until your problem is full force, and you step in when you notice the slight issue.
He abandoned his office and later remarked that the sidewalks were literally covered with burning turpentine balls. I knew all too well where they came from, and I knew all too well why every burning building first caught from the top. Though others have discounted the use of aircraft in the attack, the KKK itself wrote of its achievement later in their newspaper, The Nation. They said that with the use of air power, they could burn out African American neighborhoods all across America. Later in the day, another eyewitness, Mr. W.I. Brown, reported, "We reached Tulsa about 2 o'clock. Airplanes were circling all over Greenwood. We stopped our cars north of the Katy Depot, going towards Sand Springs. The heavens were lightening up as plain as day from the many fires over the Negro section. I could see from my car window that 2 airplanes were doing most of the work."
So even after they leveled this African American community, they still were flying above, looking for survivors, looking for other things they can destroy, kill. That is to me, Lord, but and it shocks me that, well, it shouldn't shock me, but it does that they not only were planning to do this to this community, this was a full force plan. This had to be a plan before the man did what he, or before they accused him of what he did, because the guy never did touch the girl. Let's just say that. But this was a plan they had, and they needed something to ignite it. And that little story, that little lie, ignited it, and that's what they needed. And they were planning on going across the entire U.S. to level African American communities. Now, mind you, there is and was a lot of African American communities. Could you imagine the devastation that would have caused?
They would every few seconds drop something, and every time they did, there was a loud explosion and the sky would be filled with flying debris. Of the 10,000 African American citizens of Greenwood, approximately 300 were killed. They were buried in mass graves. The Salvation Army reported not on the number of bodies, but that they had to feed and provide water for 37 grave diggers.
Sad. You don't even give them the respect and dignity to report on who died. And a lot of people don't know, who don't, because a lot of people fled the area and left and went to near surrounding cities like Muskogee, Omogi, um, Claremore, Catoosa. They escaped and went to these nearby counties, so they wouldn't be a target. Um, but they say approximately 300. They don't know that for sure. They don't know how many people actually um, lost their lives in this because again, they didn't report on it. So they didn't talk to families and ask families who's missing, blah blah blah. They did not, and some families simply went separate directions because they had to run. They didn't have time to make proper planning or discuss where they're going to go or meet back up at. This is very much so devastating. And the mass grave that they're referring to has been built. Okay, they built a stadium over this mass grave. Now, could you imagine somebody going to a current cemetery and just putting an amusement park on top of it? That's exactly what they did. The amount of disrespect for the ones who lost their lives is just ridiculous, and it goes to show you how humanity can be at times.
Many more were injured, and the Red Cross provided tents and some basic supplies to those who had survived. The destruction was staggering. Greenwood was completely burned out. Damages totaled an estimated $23 million, which equates to about $310 million in today's money. In all, 35 city blocks were destroyed and 1,256 residences were burned to ash. 21 churches and 20 grocery stores were burned, as well as 2 banks, a hospital, the federal post office, and more than 600 businesses.
You even attack the people who cannot defend themselves, who are sick, ill, and in a hospital. How disgusting does a person have to be to level a hospital?
Even the Mount Zion Baptist Church had burned to the ground. Only the steeple remained, towering like a symbol of hope over the burned-out ruins. Incredibly, no insurance claims were ever paid to any African American who applied. Likewise, no civil claims were ever awarded in court. Not a single person in the white mob was ever charged or jailed for either the murders or the property destruction.
Now that is a shocker. It should that it is, but it isn't. It is, but it isn't. Now you mean to tell me this started because a young African American male was arrested? Okay, he was arrested um for allegedly sexually assaulting a white woman. Okay, that was found out to be false. He was jailed for that, which started all this. You mean to tell me the ones who caused all this destruction never received a single sentence, never received a civil suit. And the people here lost everything and insurance claims never paid out. Yeah, that tells you who America sides for at times, or who they did side for at times. It's very sad. It's very, very sad. And the fact that people say that racism doesn't exist. This happened 100 years, almost 100 years ago, I think. Yeah, it's 100 years ago. This happened, a little over 100 years ago. That's not that long. That is not that long. There are great great grandkids who are alive today whose grandparents witnessed this and was involved in this and told them the stories. They did manage to rebuild, but I'm gonna let the video play so we can keep going.
And nobody ever helped rebuild the neighborhoods afterwards.
Yeah.
Hundreds of African Americans fled the city, never to return. Tulsa's African American community, which had achieved the American dream and had built one of the most prosperous communities in the entire United States, white or black, in a single day was utterly destroyed and rendered destitute. Incredibly, the story of what happened, how it happened, and what took place afterwards was covered up for 70 years. It wasn't taught in schools, it wasn't acknowledged by the state of Oklahoma, and only in 1996 did the city of Tulsa formally acknowledge what had happened.
Now, with that being said, they acknowledged it, but even then, it was not taught in schools. They didn't talk about it. They acknowledged it. It was the difference between teaching and putting it in schools so people know the history, so we can keep history from repeating itself over and over again. But still to this day, this is not put in textbooks. This is not taught in school. This is not a part of Black History Month. And you just heard it. This was basically the most, oh, anyway.
This story has always held special meaning for me because I'm one of the first historians who worked to bring it back to light. My part has been documenting the role of air power, and I contributed original research into the types of planes, the number that flew, who owned them, and even the names of some of the pilots. None were ever arrested, fined, or even sanctioned in any way. Their planes were not impounded. The civil aviation authorities, the governor of Oklahoma, and the mayor simply looked the other way. Perhaps the greatest irony is that the Tulsa police actually hired the Curtis Southwest Airplane Company to fly an aerial survey and document the damage done in the Greenwood district.
No, talk about slap in the face. Talk about adding insult to injury. You hire the same company that these people bought these aircrafts from to fly over and serve the land, but yet you did nothing to help rebuild it. You didn't add any funds. You didn't put any labor into it. You did nothing, absolutely nothing, but survey it. For what? Let me know. What was the point?
The pilots not only got away with murder, but then got paid to document their own evil work. Today, the airport that was once called Curtis Southwest Field
Wait, they hired the pilots? See, I didn't know that part. They hired the same pilots who dropped bombs on them to survey it. So they flew back over the same land that they killed people, innocent people, and destroyed their homes, families, lives to survey it. Ciao.
is closed and long gone. Nothing remains of its two hangars or the company. Not even a plaque marks the
They
spot.
shouldn't.
In Greenwood, the only surviving foundation of what was once the Black Wall Street
That's
is
crazy.
under the Vernon AME Church.
That's crazy.
Over the years since I first published this story, I've been interviewed dozens of times by the press. As well, I've received many emails about my research. Some refuse to recognize what happened.
So you know what, y'all? This little story here. A lot of people still have speculation as to what happened. But okay, so a little bit of my knowledge, they were able to rebuild this entire community. And when they rebuilt it, they built it bigger and better than the first one time that they got destroyed. So, um, without the help of the government, insurance companies, or the people who decided to destroy it. Now, I am probably sure there was probably some white people who did go help, but the ones who caused the problem nowhere to be found except for surveying the land. Now, what happened to this day and age, all those businesses and homes and stuff, people have been forced out. They were forced out of the businesses by the inflation of rent, taxes, all of that. And now this area is no longer a black community. Um, it's pretty much a baseball stadium and a downtown for Tulsa, which is one of the highest valued areas in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So, if you guys are interested in more of this information, I will be doing more research on this. I am very familiar with this particular uh, topic. I actually marched in the Tulsa race riot. No, in the excuse me, in the 100-year anniversary of this, where I learned a lot of information. But again, as always, make sure you give this video a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe, and make sure your post notifications are turned on. And as always, stay blessed, stay positive, and stay motivated. And I'll see you guys in another video. Bye.